Oh, hey there, I'm Rob.
And I'm Shannon. Welcome to Build Up, the show about shows between the shows. We have Jonathan Rhys Meyers here to talk about Damascus Cover.
This action movie follows Meyers' character, Ari Ben-Zion, who's assigned by the Mossad to smuggle a chemical weapons scientist out of Syria.
Very true. The mission goes wrong, and Ari discovers he is a pawn in a much bigger plan.
Ooh. That sounds pretty exciting and pretty scary.
Yeah.
What do you think? Why don't we talk to our audience about how their life might be kind of exciting and scary and dramatic?
Yeah,
Right?
I think so.
Yeah?
Let's do this.
Okay, maybe we should find some.
Oh, squeezing
audience
in.
members. Ooh, do you mind if I sit over here? Thank you.
Dun, dun. Oh, hi. What's your name?
Michael.
Michael. So what have you done today?
Today I've been waiting for Jonathan Rhys Meyers.
Oh, he was waiting for Jonathan Rhys Meyers.
Just a normal guy with one earbud in. But he didn't know what was about to happen.
He was so full of suspense, sitting on a couch. But is this couch just a regular couch? Or is it a murder couch? Wow, super exciting, right? What'd you have for breakfast?
I had a bacon, egg, and cheese. Typical New Yorker.
He thought he was a typical New Yorker. And he ate a bacon, egg, and cheese for breakfast. But what he didn't know, what was inside that bacon, egg, and cheese, was deadly.
It was actually dog hair because the person who made it has a dog and they didn't wash their hands and he had an allergic reaction.
Oh no, he didn't even know he was allergic, did he?
He just found out. Then his mom called him and said, "Hey, I'm sorry. I should have told you sooner." Yeah.
No. Bye, Mom. I love you.
He said bye to his mom on live TV. It was awkward. She was like, wait a minute, you're dying right now? And you're just gonna tell me through a live camera feed?
Yeah. And then the rest of his family was like, "Oh no, are we gonna divvy up his comics or not?" Do you have a lot of comic books?
Yeah, but I'm not leaving him to my family.
Ooh,
He's greedy.
that's pretty harsh. You're dead. What are you gonna do with those comics? You're literally dead. You've got nothing left to do with them.
He's gonna make a coffin out of his comic books and get buried in them in the ground. Can you read in the afterlife? We don't know, but maybe. Do you think you can read in the afterlife?
Can you?
I sure the heck hope so.
All right. I'm really hoping for you. Well, isn't it great how you could just see, like, your everyday life can just be like instantly turned into a mystery or action film.
That's pretty fun.
Sometimes I feel like I wish
Wait.
my life was an action
Is your
film.
phone ringing?
Sorry, I'm so embarrassed.
Oh, Shannon.
Hello?
Is this Shannon?
Yeah, the famous build-up host.
That's the one with the famous cat. I have your cat, Shannon.
Oh my God, what?
I have Mr. Whiskers, that's right. Right.
No!
Listen,
Yeah.
that's Mr. Whiskers. And he has a few less whiskers.
Don't hurt my cat! Whatever you do, don't hurt my cat!
If you ever want to see Mr. Whiskers again, never stop building up, Shannon. Build up forever. Build up till you can't build up no more.
Oh, they hung up on me! Someone stole my cat! What's gonna happen? I'm freaking out! Oh my God!
Shannon,
What?
Shannon, over here. I've been hacking into the mainframe. I've triangulated the system. It sounds like the cell phone call came from within the studio. Someone in the studio stole your cat.
Oh my God! Where's my cat? Oh, good thing I carry a little can of cat food.
Tap it. Anyone?
Come on, Whiskers! Where are you? Oh my God! Someone stole my cat! Someone hurt my cat! What? Oh my gosh! Brittany Jones Cooper! What are you doing with my cat? You just had to ask. You didn't have to threaten me and my cat's life.
Oh, okay. Well, can you just do more build-ups then?
Oh, sure, anytime.
Awesome.
Oh my God, that was really simple. We just had to find a connection and, have a little conversation about it.
Yeah, that really resolved itself easily. That was great.
Communication is really important, guys.
It really is,
Definitely.
I think that's something we learned here at the Build Studio.
Yeah, everyone should communicate. Well, for those just tuning in, this has been Build Up, the show about shows between the shows. If you want to continue the fun, head over to buildseries.com right now to see Jonathan Rhys Meyers talk about Damascus cover with Brittany Jones Cooper.
Oh, yeah. Meow, 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 meow.
Oh, Whiskers, are you okay?
Meow, meow.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Build. I'm your host, Brittany Jones Cooper. Jonathan Rhys Meyers is known for his dramatic roles in the Tudors and Vikings, and now he's hitting the big screen in the thriller Damascus Cover. In the film, he plays a spy assigned to smuggle a chemical weapons scientist out of Syria, but soon discovers that he's a pawn in a much bigger plan. Let's take a look.
For most of the past year, I have been German businessman Hans Hoffmann. My real name is Ari Ben-Sion. Lying to everyone is difficult, but my life depends on keeping the two worlds separate. If I could, I would be Hans Hoffmann all the time. Hans Hoffmann.
We found him. He's at the Avalon Hotel. We're a go.
Okay. One of our agents has been passing top-secret information to the Syrians. My partner and I have been assigned to bring him back to Israel for interrogation.
Yes.
Don't worry. I will get you to Syria.
If my people find me, I am dead.
Trust me, my friend. Did you find who I'm looking for?
All I know is his code name. We call him the Angel.
I need to know.
Hello? Hello?
When missions go bad, there's only one rule. Protect your partner.
Everyone put your hands together for Jonathan Rhys Meyers.
Hello.
How you doing today?
Yeah, very well, thank you. Thank you.
Thanks for coming by our studio. Big fan of yours and a lot of your projects. This one I loved. It was just like a classic spy thriller, So how did you get to be a part of this project? How did you see the script? What was sort of the origin story for you?
Well, I met Dan a few years ago, and he presented the script to me, and he presented his idea of what he wanted to do with Damascus Cover, the book. The book originally is set in 1977. We decided to move it up to 1989, so we wouldn't have to deal with as much of the... if you make a film in the 1970s now, you have to go almost cartoonish because fashion is so borrowed from it. So to really give that sort of sense of not a dull time, but a transitional time in the world. We thought 1989 would suit better. Also, it just seemed like a spy movie that my grandfather would have liked. In the mold of, you know, Funeral in Berlin, The Spy Who Came In From the Cold. It's not exactly a movie about sort of huge explosions and, you know, things blowing up and car chases. That's really not what these people do. Everything is much more covert than that. It's much more simplistic. But in its simplicity, it's much more harrowing.
I would think, too, with the timing, we don't have to worry about technology, which was so nice. Like you said, he's an intelligence officer, he's a spy, but he's not relying on gadgets and all these things that we're kind of used to seeing now. It is this more a simpler story without the technology.
Yeah, I mean, they had technology then, but certainly they didn't have any technology that is as advanced as we see now. Now you see a spy movie, everybody's got incredible cell phones, and everyone's like, wow, why can't I buy that cell phone? Or, you know, so to be able to stay away from that and stay within the heartbreak of the characters that we are playing. Mickey, played by the late, great John Hurt, is a man who's been doing it all his life. He's almost broken from doing this, you know, sending young boys and young women to their deaths for something that in its first essence is the greater good. But at the time, it doesn't really seem like the greater good. It's incredibly traumatic. Olivia Thirlby's character is another person who's working in an intelligence agency, and she has not been able to see her son. This has been kept away from her, almost like a bargaining chip for her to continue doing her job. And then Ari has just lost his son because his son found a loaded gun in the house and shot himself in the head. And so Ari fails in a mission to bring back Aoud. And when he gets back, Mickey knows that he's under severe traumatic pressure, so they send him for mental evaluation. He fails this, but at the same time, another mission has come up that he's almost perfect for. Now, he thinks he's the mission, and as you find out in the movie, he's not quite the mission.
And he's so raw. I mean, you can see his pain still dealing with his grief, and he's in these incredibly tense moments. And so how do you channel that pain? Because so much of it was unsaid with him.
Yeah, I mean, what I tried to do with Ari Ben-Sion and his sort of alter ego, Hans Hofmann, and remember, he says that he's been Hans Hofmann for the last year. Goodness knows how many characters he had to be before that. So every scene that I had to be in, I wanted it to be like there's like almost two wolves fighting inside him the whole time. But he has to keep it inside, because if he's going to let it burst out, he's going to be uncontrollable. He has to really hold that tension, hold that anger as much as possible. Even when he meets the character of Selma, he cannot allow himself to love. There is no love. He's carrying the spirit of a dead child around in him. So he goes on this mission in the hope that he may find some redemption in being able to create a successful mission, or find a bullet which will bring him peace. You see, the thing about these people, and I spoke to some intelligence people, they don't use the word spy. It doesn't exist in their world. It's more of a Hollywood term. They call themselves intelligence operatives. And it's very, very difficult to get information out of them because they don't speak about themselves very much. They keep everything quiet. But that silence can be deafening, you know?
So in preparing to play this man, you said you met with some intelligent officers. What were you able to pull from them, even if they couldn't speak about maybe some of the things they've experienced? What were you able to pull into your character?
I was able to pull into the character that you never actually let what you really, really feel show. Keep it all inside. We keep it all inside. First of all, they're soldiers. So everything that was emotional in them was broken and beaten out of them during their military training. So in some ways, we forget this about people who go to the military, is that we train these people to be killers. And then we expect them to come back into society and work as normal people. That's incredibly difficult and incredibly complicated. And without actual real help to deal with the trauma of what these people have seen and the things that they've had to do, they're going to be lost men and women. Without being able to find a way back to their spiritual peace. Ari is definitely in that group. And so even though he feels empathy and he does feel empathy for Selma, he cannot feel love. He cannot put himself at risk. He is a ghost, even to himself. And he's playing it. He's playing in part of a game that he doesn't know. I mean, we think of intelligence officers as having information, but it's misinformation. They never know what the right hand is doing. They never know what the left hand is doing, because if the right and the left hand knew what they were doing, we'd all be at war. I think Daniel Burke, our director, really, really wanted to focus on that, rather than hitting people across the face with a sledgehammer or sort of, a big car chase scene or, machine guns to entertain people for a couple of minutes and cause some actual noise. It's the silence in this movie. It's the quietness of these people. It's the loneliness of their lives is heartbreaking. And also, I spoke to some war photographers who have a very, very good aspect of what goes on in a war, because it's a really, really strange thing. People will think that a war photographer is protected behind the camera lens, but actually they're right up close. They see it closer than anybody else. And I met one who came back from Bosnia and Herzegovina, and he had been to the graveside of a massacre, an enormous massacre. And when he came home, people asked him, so what was it like? And he said, fine. Because what other answer could he give that anybody else could understand? You would have to know what it feels like. You can't explain to somebody the feel of steel in your mouth if you've never had steel in your mouth. But once you've had it in your mouth, you never forget it. And so that's who the character of Ari really is.
And you mentioned the silence in the film, and I'm right there with you. When I was watching, it's like him in the car. It's just, you're always wondering what he's thinking, how he's processing. But there are some really touching moments, and your chemistry with Olivia is super tangible. So how important do you think that played into his character? Because I actually disagree a little bit. I could see that empathy with him, and I could see him loving her.
He won't allow himself to do so, even if he feels it himself.
Yeah.
He won't allow himself, because he knows that if he allows himself to actually truly feel for someone again, he may get hurt again, and he won't survive the next time. It's you don't go to a junkyard to buy a new car. So he not only notices or realizes the damage that has existed in himself, he sees the damage in her. It's almost like a reflective mirror of what they go through. He doesn't know what she is until later on in the film, but he knows that she's not what she seems, because he lives in a world where nobody is what they seem. And then, of course, the situation, as you can see, especially in the final scenes of the movie, what's going to happen? And look where Syria is now. Because people were not paying attention. They were letting people like Siraj run loose, and when you let greedy people run loose who are looking for power over other people. You see, this is something strange when you start reading Howard's book, and also other books, especially by John le Carre. Who has a great sort of take on what these intelligence people go through, is that it's almost like these things are spinning out of control, and they're spinning out of control by people who are hungry for power, but not for power to have things. Truly dangerous people don't want to own things. Money is a tool. It's people. They want to own people. They want to control their lives. They want to move them like chess pieces. It's a way of them believing that they're God. Nobody is God.
Where did you guys shoot, and how did that play into the storytelling?
Germany, Casablanca, and Israel. So most of the shooting took place in Casablanca, which was a very, very good double for Damascus at that time. And also because the Moroccan film industry has been making films for so many years, there was a pool of amazing local talent that we could pull from, and beautiful locations. So they're so adept at making films over there. It's not like going to a country where nobody's ever seen a film camera before. These guys are you know, they're great at their job. I mean, I think maybe a year after we left, they were shooting Mission Impossible, the new Mission Impossible there, you know? So people really know what to do and how to make films over there and how to make films move. And of course, we had a very, very small budget. So then when you have a small budget, you have to replace cash with brains. You have to have a plan A, plan B, plan C, and plan D for something to work. Remember, you've got a crew of maybe, you know, 70 to 100 people who speak 18 languages between them. So that can be complicated from every point of view. Not only complicated from the filmmaking point of view, but also from the personal relationships that you have with people. When you're making a film, those personal relationships that you have with the people around you reflect what goes on screen. So you bring those moments into your production.
And having a smaller budget, how does that impact you? Because I'm sure you have to be more scrappy, but I think in a lot of places you can maybe be more creative as well.
Yeah, I mean, certainly you have to be a lot more scrappy, and certainly a little bit more money would have helped. Yeah, I mean, I've been on films that had lots of money and they didn't work, and I've been on films that had small money. I mean, it's like I made a film called The 12th Man with Harold Swart, and we had the same amount of money as we had for Damascus Cover, and it's one of the best Second World War films I've ever seen and ever made. And I had to do the whole film in German, and everybody else is speaking Norwegian. So now I'm on a film set where I speak nobody's language. So then I have to communicate in a different way. I have to communicate with the feeling that I give to people, understanding without using language to understand. And once you get into doing that, it's not that hard. People want the same things. They want peace, happiness, love, success, and care for their family. And as long as you can keep on those levels, then everything will work fine. But it is hard work. Having less money is hard work. Sometimes having more money defeats your film.
Yeah. And there is a good amount of action in this movie, and I want to note that your suits in the movie are on point. I mean, they're
you're so kind.
They're so, I mean, they just take you to that time, and they create this man, but also you have to fight in these suits, in these very dramatic scenes. So what was it like training for those interactions? And
actually, during the fight scene where he has to use Krav Maga, I ripped all my trousers. I ripped all the jackets because, you know, the one thing is, if you're wearing a suit and you want to be comfortable in it, wear a suit that's slightly bigger. But if you want to wear a suit on film that actually looks good, you have to wear it almost perfectly fitted, which means that you can have restrictions. Not the same level of restrictions that I had with the body armor that I use in Vikings, because then I have to use a sword and a horse. These are completely different, and that's a completely different world to live in, you know? I've been thrown from horses on more times than I could possibly imagine. But for the fight scenes, Ron, who was my fight trainer, who was a student of Dennis Hoberman in Israel, who created what we now know as modern Krav Maga. It was created on the streets of Hungary after the Second World War. So young men and women who were Holocaust survivors could actually survive without having money, without having access to anything. So Krav Maga was a way of incorporating traditional martial fighting styles with street fighting. You know, so for those scenes, they had to be fast, they had to be gritty, and at the same time, I ended up losing a suit or two.
I can imagine.
But everybody was safe and nobody got hurt, and that's the most important thing.
True. And you mentioned John Hurt, and we lost him in January.
We did.
But this was his last film.
Yes.
So what does that mean for you that you got to be a part of his last project?
Well, I'd known John for 25 years because he had very close connections to Ireland. So, and of course the Irish acting community is small, as the Irish community is small anyway. And so I spent a lot of time with John, who was a very lovely, very, very deeply intelligent man. And of course, he carried that beautiful voice that just is unforgettable, unrecognizable. You know it all over the world. It's a great boon for an actor to have a beautiful voice, and certainly one as beautiful as his. But it's a strange thing. Yes, we knew that John had cancer, aggressive cancer. But John didn't care about cancer. John cared about how good he was going to be in his performance. He, even up until the last moment said, I'm going to beat this. This is what I do. I beat things. I'm an actor. Any actor who's had any success knows how to beat things. And it was too aggressive at the time for him. So it's incredibly sad to lose an actor of that quality because you can't replace them. He's an irreplaceable part on the great chessboard of performers that we have all over the world. I mean, I remember even as a young boy, and John has given very many great performances. I'm sure in the United States he first became famous for Alien, when he had the alien coming out of his tummy, and Midnight Express. But it's his performance as the bird in the field was something quite extraordinary. And that's an extraordinary movie anyway. An incredible book by John B. Keane, an incredible film by Jim Sheridan. An extraordinary performance by Richard Harris as the Bull McCabe, but it was and Sean Bean as his son and Brenda Fricker. But there was something about John Hurt's bird. He had, there was something like he was playing somebody who was touched, and so there was a sadness in him, and you could pity him, and at the same time there was a fierce resilience in him. And very, very few actors can give performances on that very many levels. Sometimes they can give you a one dimension, sometimes they can give you two dimensions. But when an actor is coming in and he's giving you a plethora, a rainbow of dimensions for you to play off of, then that's something extraordinary and it's a joy to watch. He was a joy to watch, and he was a joy to be around.
Very, very rare. And I'm curious, have you directed?
No.
Okay, because the way you talk about film is so passionate, and it's an art, right?
Yes.
So have you ever thought about directing,
Yes.
going behind the camera, and what kind of projects would you like to work on?
Oh, I don't know, but God help them. No. I don't know. I couldn't say exactly what I'd want to direct, but I think I would be quite fierce in what I wanted. Not because I know everything, and I've given okay performances, and I've given some bad performances in my time. But I remember something that Edison said, because he tried 2,000 times to make the light bulb, and somebody said, "So you failed 2,000 times to try to create the light bulb?" And he said, "No, I discovered 2,000 ways not to make a light bulb, and then I discovered how to make it." And once you discover how to make it, then you can sort of like repeat it on different levels. So when I do direct something, I will choose something very, very carefully. But because I've been doing it for so long, I have great empathy for the people that I would work with, and great empathy for the actors that I would choose. But I would be fierce, because I know the good side and the bad side of it. And I want everybody's success. I mean, I did this TV show a bunch of years ago called The Tudors.
Just a little show. I don't know if you've heard of it.
And I got some award nominations for it, but I had some lovely actors working with me on it. Of course, lovely Sam Neill, and Natalie Dormer and Henry Cavill. And I applaud every time I see my actors that I've worked with go off and do successful things. Now, that doesn't always happen in the film industry. I love success in other people. It's one of the things that I really like about the United States, because it does applaud success. And when I see my friends go and do some wonderful things and give wonderful performances, I mean, Colin Farrell in The Killing of a Sacred Deer, he's just so good. Toby Kebbell in Rock and Roller. I know all these boys when, they hadn't made films yet. We were all just kids fighting for the same roles. But I'm super proud. I'm super proud of the people that I've worked with, and I'm super proud of their success.
And I think it goes both ways. We just had Glenn Close in here before you.
I've done
and when
2
she heard you were
movies
here,
with
she's like, "Oh, Jonathan," and she wanted to come see you, and she was so excited. So I'm sure that energy that you're putting out, people are also throwing back at you.
Yeah, sure. I made a TV movie of the great script The Lion in Winter with Glenn, and she won a Golden Globe for playing Eleanor of Aquitaine. I was playing her nephew, Prince Philippe of Burgundy. And then she made a film, which was a passion project of hers a few years later, called Albert Nobbs. And she rang me and she said, Johnny, I need you to come in and play this lord, this lord who's married but really having an affair with his friend, and I need you to bring that energy to the film. And of course, because it's a passion project, of course, it's another film where we're working with very, very little money. I said, you don't have to pay me a penny. I just got on an airplane to Dublin, and I sat there with myself and Brenda Fricker again, Brendan Gleeson. There's just so many good actors. Mia Wasikowska, she's just extraordinary. I was blown away. I was almost in awe of that girl. But I've been in awe of Glenn for years, ever since I saw her as Sunny in what's the movie? What's it about? Klaus von Bülow. It's extraordinary. Jeremy Irons gives an extraordinary performance, but Glenn gives an incredible performance because her character, Sunny, has been sort of comatose. But you can still see that there's a character underneath that's being played the entire time. And I mean, that takes a different level of actress to do that, And there's only few actresses that can do that. And I've been lucky enough to work with a few of them. One in particular was Toni Collette. When we made Velvet Goldmine together, even though I was only 19 years old and these people were far more experienced and far more accomplished than I was, I recognized immediately that this was probably the world's greatest actresses. And that's been repeated in her performances over time. And if you've seen Hereditary, she's on a different level. And you like seeing people that are on a different level like that because you do learn from them. You do learn to up your game.
Absolutely. Jonathan, I could talk to you for an hour, but I think our audience is really excited to ask you a couple questions.
You're so kind.
So who do we have first?
Jonathan, thank you for coming.
Oh, thank you.
I want to first thank you for understanding the veteran psyche. Being a combat vet myself, coming home, dealing with post-traumatic stress disorder, and using acting as a method of being able to mess with emotions and then being characters that you create and throwing them away. It's a great way, and it's very therapeutic. So, adapting to society. But you played a character, a little-known character, Elvis Presley.
I did play Elvis Presley, yes.
In an HBO miniseries, and you gave a phenomenal performance of somebody that I would sit around, my uncle's house, listen to records since I was knee-high to a grasshopper. And I just wanted to ask you, as an actor, how you got inside a head of someone who is complex on so many different levels, and what your method was to take on, one of the most iconic people in our history.
Well, thank you for watching Elvis, and thank you for coming home. What I did with Elvis Presley is I never thought of him as Elvis Presley. I thought of him as a poor boy from Tupelo, Mississippi, who wanted to make enough money to buy his mama a house. And as long as I kept it at that level, I never thought of him as an icon. Because Elvis never thought of him as himself as an icon. He actually thought of himself more as a white gospel singer. But once I kept it at that ground roots level, because as soon as you start thinking of Elvis and what Elvis means to the United States, it's too big, it's too enormous. It's playing, somebody that's these shoes are almost impossible to fill. Because everybody has their own dreams, their own desires of what that character was and may be. But I shot that film in New Orleans. I had an enormous amount of help from the people of New Orleans, enormous amount of help from the production and my producers, enormous amount of help from the actors, and the musicians that were around at the time. But the hardest thing was, it's kind of a funny story, was how to move like Elvis Presley. So what they did, their idea was to send me to a dance instructor to learn how to do the Elvis moves. And so I went there one Sunday evening. It was about 4 o'clock in the evening, sun going down in Louisiana. I went into this ballet room to this incredibly nice man, incredibly clever, incredibly talented dancer, who had this lovely New Orleans accent. And he said, "So you want to do an Elvis Presley impersonation?" And I was like, not quite. But I went through the lesson, and the lesson was very methodical in the same way as you would teach Nijinsky or any of these great dancers. He was like Daliev, you know? And so after my lesson, I came back to the hotel and I called Jim, the director, and I was like, I don't know how I'm going to do this, you know? This is not quite what I had in mind. So I went to the set the next day. The next scene that they were filming was with a guy called Marcus. Lovely African-American, talented singer, dancer, writer, and actor from New Orleans. And he was on stage because what Elvis used to do is he used to sneak into all the clubs and listen to all the blues music and the rhythm and blues music. And you know, like any great artist, he stole like an artist. And he went in and he watched and watched. And I sat by the monitor with the director and I said, that's the guy. Let's lose the whole ballet thing. And I went and I asked the guy, could you come to my hotel room and teach me how to do this? He said, it would be my pleasure to do that. So he came to my hotel room, we had a little something to eat, and then within a half an hour, he had me dancing like Elvis Presley. And he's like, and he just turned around and he said, ain't you never had sex, boy? He says, you're like what, 26? He goes, think of that. Think of the best time you ever had having sex. And that's what Elvis Presley was doing. He was trying to promote a sense of sexuality. He wasn't doing particular dance moves. He was actually promoting a sexuality which was unknown to the United States before that. It was shocking. It was so shocking to see. I mean, Elvis Presley, it's even in the movie Forrest Gump, when he's on the Ed Sullivan Show. And, you know, and the mom and little Forrest are watching, and he sees that guy, and and Elvis is doing his moves, and the mother's like, you can't watch this. But it was a great pleasure to play Elvis Presley. And thank you to that young gentleman for teaching me how to dance. Otherwise, I'd have sucked.
Those hips didn't lie. It was good. It was good. Next question.
Hi, my question is about Henry VIII. I was wondering if it's something similar, the experience you had with him. You couldn't think about the Henry VIII as such a big historical character. What was the biggest challenge working on this character?
Well, first of all, I don't really look like Henry. But then Henry VIII, in the paintings that you have seen of Henry VIII, were painted by a painter called Hans Holbein. Hans Holbein was an extraordinary painter, but he used to paint in several different parts. So the image you see of Henry is actually 4 different paintings molded together like a triptych, crop triptych. But as a young man, he was a young man. So there is one painting of him on a coin where he was as thin as I am with long blonde hair. This changed as he got older. But you see, when you're thinking about historical characters, I think Napoleon Bonaparte said that history is a set of lies agreed upon. So that when you're reading something like some historical facts about Henry ap Tudor, you're not always reading it from an ap Tudor point of view. Because, of course, the ap Tudor family died with Elizabeth I and then became the Stuarts, who then rewrote history, of course, in their own benefit. So when you're looking at history, you always have to think of history and you take it with a pinch of salt. I had to create Henry's bulk, Henry's size. I'm 5'10". Henry VIII was 6'3". He was one of the tallest men in Europe at the time. Actually one of the tallest men in Europe at the time. So I had to put a lot of that enormous physicality, which he used to impose his will on other people. I had to use my mind to impose my will on other people. So it was more complicated from that. It would have been easier if you had just had an actor who came in who could just bulk himself around the set and he's the biggest thing on the set. And then that's very easy to identify and then you can intimidate people. But I had to intimidate people psychologically. I had to take Henry's 300-pound of girth, his 6'3" height, and I had to put it in my eyes and in my mouth. And that was a little bit more complicated. And because first of all, people are going to look and he goes, he doesn't look like Henry VIII. But nobody is going to watch a show for 4 seasons if you had somebody who actually did look like Henry VIII. This is the modern world and this is television and you got to tell it as it is.
It's Hollywood. And one last question.
Hi, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
It's a huge pleasure to be in your presence.
Oh, thank you.
I love your work. So my question to you is, obviously you have done, 2 bios, but is there a bio that's close to your heart that you would like to produce or direct in big screen?
I would, thank you very much for the question. It's a pleasure meeting you also. I've always had an idea. There's a few, actually. I'd love to play Django Reinhardt, the jazz guitar player, because he has an extraordinary story, he has an extraordinary art, and also it falls into him being born in the Ardennes in Belgium as a gypsy and then being chased out of, by, obviously the Nazis were killing everybody who wasn't Aryan. So he had to run. And he was one of those characters, tomorrow never existed for Django Reinhardt. It was always now, maintenant, maintenant, maintenant. Demain, it didn't exist. And when you're living in that real, not existential life, but existential life, then his music took off. It took off like a bird has wings. A bird doesn't know why it has wings. It just knows that it can fall off the side of a mountain and glide. So this is interesting to me about Django. But also, I would love to play Eugene O'Neill, the playwright who wrote A Long Day's Journey into Night. Because he'd gone through an awful lot of things in his life, personal things that weren't given to him. He created problems for himself that God did not create for him. And then he went and he had a rebirth. And he says in the book, A Long Day's Journey into Night, that he goes, I had 2 births, and the second one was the only one that I approved of. And that's something that's really interesting, is our ability as human beings to change. To take what we are, which is imperfect humans, and then we change with the process of life. And if we put enough effort into it, then we can change into something that is truly, truly beautiful, truly peaceful. I have a son. He's 19 months old. Now, I learned very quickly once my son was born that my son does not belong to me. My son came through me in the same way as a bow will shoot an arrow. I can shelter his body, but I can't give him my thoughts, and I can't give him my soul. And, God does not go backwards. God expands the same way as the universe expands. So I would not like my son to be inspired by me. I'm inspired by my son. There we go.
Right? Wolf? Son is Wolf, right? Yeah.
And that's my wife.
I love that. I love being inspired by your son and keeping him just right there all the time.
All the time.
Yeah, that's lovely. Well, Jonathan, it was...
Well, it's like, do you know what? It's sometimes when you're trying to figure out life, you're trying to figure out how a watch works. Sometimes it's easier to just watch the time.
Jonathan, it was so great chatting with you today. I please come back and visit us.
Oh, it would
anytime.
be my pleasure. Thank you very much.
So much fun. And you guys can check out Jonathan in Damascus Cover. Hits theaters on July 27th, right?
Yeah, my birthday.
Yeah. Give it up for Jonathan.
Yeah.